Hello and welcome to 310 Dillingham Avenue. I'm Jeff Wyman, FCTV's Government Access Coordinator. We're in Studio A here with a Senate Spotlight update with Senator Sue Moran. Welcome, Sue, back to our studio. How are you?
Really good. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
You've been busy, I take it.
Wow. To be honest, it's a bit of jet lag when you do that 24-hour legislative session. It seems like for whatever reason, a lot of things come up at the last minute, and that certainly happened this year. But there's a lot of good news going forward.
Great. So the formal session up in Boston has adjourned. It's August.
Right. And we do have some unfinished business. We've got a big bill that's going to be really foundational for our economy, and because of the sort of moving target of the coffers or the funds in the state, the treasurer's accounts, we want to have those certified to be sure that we can afford all of the programs that we have put forth. So now that formal session is ended, we would go back in an informal session, and either votes would be taken informally, which would have to be unanimous, or there would be a special session called. So I expect that might happen after this certification, which would be about the first or second week in September by auditor bump, and after the House moves, because the House has to go first before the Senate would come back. So that's what's sort of the next step here going forward.
Okay, so that gets us into one of the bullet points that we've got listed here as far as where we are in the legislative process right now. August 2022, the 23 budget has been signed. So after that happens, where we are now and what happens next?
Well, it's really looking at all of the programs that we have put forth. For example, cannabis at the last minute was approved by the Senate, but it wasn't put forth to be signed by the governor. So sort of have a general agreement, but haven't put it in to actually go into practice. And the point of that cannabis bill is really to fine-tune the initial approvals so that more businesses, in an equity sense of folks of color, women, can take advantage of that opportunity. And part of that is agreed upon, but to move forward, we've got to go to the next step. So that's going to be something that you look forward to. And it also tweaks the way municipalities deal with cannabis businesses. It puts an equity lens where the statute initially talked about reimbursement for municipalities for the cost of cannabis. And this really calls upon municipalities to really look at those numbers. And we'll see going forward where that ends up.
Excellent. So we mentioned the budget has been signed. It's been pretty much finalized. So let's start with a wider scope here, talking about what's in it statewide. What are some of the highlights of the budget for Massachusetts?
Sure. So it's over $50 billion. So that's fairly big. It's 1.2 for unrestricted general governments, $45 million for payments in lieu of taxes for state-owned land, supplemental local aid, $6 billion for Chapter 70, $1.18 billion for early education and childcare, which I'm super pleased about because that intersects with my childcare bill that I'm right, exactly. Very proud of that, which of course I'll always segue back into. We've got green energy programs that are terrific, and it also kind of supports my strong focus on the safe decommissioning of Holtec nuclear in Plymouth. And then we've also improved human service transportation. So that's pretty big over the state. And then when you look in particular at Barnstable, I was able to obtained $300,000 for mass military support. So that's going to be huge moving forward for our veterans. We've also, and it's also going to support food distribution, which we've learned through COVID is an ongoing need. I've got $150,000 going to the Falmouth Net process so that we can look at whether municipal broadband is really a better fit to Falmouth and perhaps greater Barnstable County, and then $100,000 for the Cranberry Health Research Center. And that's, it's not only important for food sources, but it's also kind of a legacy historical brand for Massachusetts. And UMass Dartmouth, for example, is a terrific partner in that research going forward so that we can look at the longevity of farmers who have really been economically challenged when they look at options like solar, for example, and ways to investigate and maybe go ahead with solar projects, but also farm cranberries at the same time. So great innovation there. And then most particularly, and I'm so proud of having worked with former Rep. Eric Turkington on housing in really focusing on Falmouth's need for affordable housing projects. So we've got $100,000 going to Falmouth Housing Corporation, and then $350,000 going to Falmouth Housing Authority for repairs and renovations of the existing housing that we have, because we're trying to really be more practical and economical by taking the assets that we do have in housing and make sure that they are very livable, clean, safe, and hopefully more energy efficient.
So you say $350,000. Does that get distributed to contractors or homeowners that rent?
Part of that, that particular amount is really going towards the authority to pay for those renovations. We do have other funding that goes towards supplementing rent, but that wasn't part of this particular initiative. But we're always watching that going forward. It's hugely important going, not only for our community and our folks who live here, but also to attract that workforce that I think every single small business is really suffering from, whether it's our hotels, our restaurants certainly, our hospitals. We have a huge challenge in just doctors, psychiatrists, nursing, and that's one of the reasons that we have a hospital boarding crisis, where folks, particularly young people who have mental health challenges and might be a danger to themselves or others, they're not directly put into treatment oftentimes. They're oftentimes brought to the emergency room, which can and has in the past. There are certain incidents where nurses and folks who work in the hospital to take care of patients have experienced a violent episode, one or the other, because it's really not the proper place for that kind of treatment. So I've been working hard on that and had a forum, quite a bit ago, probably more than a year, with the heads of the Cape Cod Healthcare and also Beth Israel Plymouth to really try to problem solve. And it brought together mental health professionals, the Commissioner of Mental Health, and it's something that I hope moving forward will get more attention because it still is a crisis.
Yes, well, thank you for the work you're doing with that. That's very important. So let's transition into, it's been hot. Not only here in Falmouth and on Cape Cod, but all over the country, and particularly all over the world. Kind of unprecedented. So climate change is real, and it's something that we really need to ramp up action towards. So what has the Senate and the legislative body been doing to combat climate change.
Sure, and you're so right to put it in terms of really a public health crisis at this point. When we look at elderly folks, for example, who might need breathing assistance or oxygen machines, and they're not only tried because their air conditioning might be non-existent,
or they can't afford it.
Or they can't afford it, exactly. And we want to do it in a way that protects our planet moving forward, right? And a couple of things. So the Senate did pass an incredible climate change bill that has been not signed quite yet, but it expands the role of the Mass Clean Energy Center and establishes a trust fund for offshore wind. So that I know probably everyone heard earlier in the year the governor was saying we've got to put more money towards this because we can't get bids, even though we know that ocean wind is something that we want to move forward with in a responsible way with respect to all the animals in the ocean and to get the benefit of that, to support our efforts at coming off coal, oil, energy sources. The bill provides job training, job placement and startup opportunities, and it allows for diversification of agricultural land, which I mentioned. So it's incredibly important when we look at the Cape in particular. In the last storms, I was out visiting the warming centers. So when I went to Falmouth High School, which was staffed by Barnstable County individuals, terrific, and I kind of asked to be educated on really what the process is. We want to make sure those types of tools stay open because, in particular, the Cape is vulnerable to lots of power outages. We all know, even in the summer. And if we're going to try to encourage and provide financial incentives for folks to come off oil and go into maybe heat pump, which are electric, look at electric vehicles. I mean, we know that I think the number's around 40% of our sort of gases, carbon, come from vehicles. And so we want to promote electric cars. But if our power keeps going out on the Cape, that would mean we would have no heat and no power in our cars, right? And so I went and I spoke with the state administration, which is working on promoting climate change. And I said, please don't forget about the challenges in my district on the Cape, because we don't necessarily have access to electricity 365 days. What is the solution there? And, if I were to look at getting a generator, for example, it's right now the technology is virtually all oil-based. So how are we coming off our carbon fuel? And the answer is this is going to be a living bill, the climate change bill. It's going to pivot with our technology access. And so batteries are going to be a big issue. Solar panels that have storage. I think we're going to see a lot more options for storage, but it's going to be a couple of years. So I also spoke with the folks in the oil industry who are still putting in generators, and I said, how are you dealing with the fact that there's great controversy in even fixing gas leaks because that's old infrastructure? It's the adage of why throw bad money, good money after bad, so to speak. And it's something that is being done very intentionally as far as kind of looking at how long is it going to be till we do have the batteries? How long is it going to be in the industry, folks who work at it, for new training to come in? And so it's a matter, I think, of really keeping the conversation going, just like we did on Main Street when there was going to be an expansion of 28 and the neighbors came in. And as chair of the Board of Selectmen, I said, okay, put the brakes on all of this. We're going to have a conversation that involves the state, the Falmouth Board of Selectmen, administration, and also the property owners and neighbors who it was going to most affect. And it was a great process. And I think, it's really been a model not only for Falmouth, but it's something I'm using going forward with housing. On the Plymouth side of my district, I've been having community conversations with administration as well as community members and builders. And then Holtec, I filed a bunch of bills to be sure that the process is transparent, and decommissioning involves a conversation with the community.
Excellent. Yeah, not to mention gas prices are pretty crazy. I know a couple of friends that have long commutes that are really struggling with that.
Well, the good news is that it's already come down. There was a lot of conversation about whether, there should be a gas tax bill. And the research that was done, and there was a lot by Senate Ways and Means and others, would essentially have a risk of giving the tax break to the big oil companies, which in the last year or so have actually made a ton of money. There was no guarantee for it to go right to the taxpayer. I mean, I felt like certainly I could have sat at the gas tank, and after you pumped your gas, I could then make sure you got your financial assistance for the great cost of that. But barring that impractical, situation, there was no way to guarantee. And so what the Senate did was pivot into other tax breaks and direct refunds, which I think you'll still see as the economic bill moves forward by, I'm guessing, hopefully early fall, maybe sooner. But it's something that in principle most everyone agrees to, and that's always a good sign of things passing.
Absolutely, always moving forward. Let's transition to sports betting, something I'm not too familiar with this recently passed legislation. I watch some sports, but I'm not a betting person at all. So educate me a little bit about this and how does it work?
Well, I'm pretty familiar with the arguments from advocates who were against sports betting for so long. Having done legal work with Indian casinos and looking at communities who had concerns about increased crime, and those are the kind of concerns that have been pretty much assuaged. And so the Senate took a look at whether we should move forward with sports betting. It's been asked for years because communities and states around us do sports betting, and the numbers is an estimated $60 million in annual tax revenue will come to Massachusetts, in addition to collecting 70 to 80 million in licensing fees. So that's a lot of help to the taxpayer, but it's got to be done carefully. So what the Senate did was move forward with a plan that didn't include college betting, with the thought that college athletes might be vulnerable to some additional pressures when you look at sports betting. The House was looking at a plan that did include college because of the popularity, and it may mean increased funding. So this is one of the great examples of when the conference committee comes together between the House and the Senate with varied bills and brings forth something that everyone can live with. It's good, it's like a mediation where sometimes everybody ends up unhappy, equally unhappy. But in this case, it's generally there will be a sports betting bill. It's not yet signed by the governor, I don't think at this moment, and it won't include college except when it gets to the playoffs. So there you go with the compromise, and it'll mean a lot to the bottom line for the taxpayers moving forward. We need it. We need to improve our transportation system. We know from the governor's stopping, really. I think it's parts of the Orange Line certainly, and other lines coming up. Secretary Tessler has promised that this is a top priority moving forward, but it's that's sort of delayed maintenance issues in part that we really have to keep up better with, because it's a not only an economic risk, it's a public health issue. And if we do want to look seriously at climate change, which most people agree about, then we have to put investments into our public transportation. Betsy Gladfelder and I, when I was chair of the Board of Selectmen, I would always say for years, starting probably 5 or 6 years ago, Betsy, where are we with the steamship coming with electric buses? And it's just now starting to come. So those are the kinds of things that we need to fund, and we need to kind of pave the way for going forward. And right now, it's been a little slow because there are also mechanical issues that you have to, if you want to have consistent service, you can't have a garage that isn't equipped for electric vehicles. So there are infrastructure investments still to come.
Betsy Gladfelder seems to be everywhere.
She still is. I think one of the bog restorations, I was in attendance with not too long ago, and we are in really frequent communication because certainly when folks need support for a grant, we get involved, usually writing some support and also trying to follow it through the process so that, we tell them, well, Senator's office is watching this, and it does, I think, give it a little bit more speed going forward. And that's why I'm so proud of having become the senator for Falmouth and the rest of the district, because the things I worked on as a select board member, I can kind of still facilitate from another perspective.
Right, that's interesting. Last but not least, healthcare, and in particular reproductive rights, which has been in the news. I'm sure everyone watching has been following this. So where's Massachusetts in the healthcare realm? What's been going on, and in particular reproductive rights?
Sure. So Massachusetts, particularly the Senate, has led in healthcare in general. Whether you look at trying to make telehealth continue where it's appropriate. I mean, there's certainly times when you actually need to see a healthcare provider in person, but other times, you just want like the cold prescription. So maybe telehealth might make, sense in that instance. Also, mental health. Why do we have a system with insurance companies where the person who has a health challenge is really meant to try avenues that they already know aren't going to work? So really to suffer longer for, just really the process of the insurance. So we're trying to make all of that more practical. We're trying to make sure like EpiPens are, that's emergency life-saving when they say they have a sensitivity towards bee stings, kids in school. We want to be sure those are more accessible and that basic health care, insulin, those things are covered. And the same premise comes with reproductive rights. Massachusetts has been a leader. We have an entire generation of women who have been personally in charge with their doctors of their health care. And for that to suddenly be stripped away after folks in my generation fought hard to get there is just a non sequitur. And frankly, it's dangerous when you look at women who don't have means. And that's been proven years and years ago. Women have died in those circumstances. And so Massachusetts, you continue to have those rights. And what we did in the Senate was we bolstered and put into place protections for healthcare providers in those circumstances. And also, we are a huge state for college education, universities. People come to Massachusetts because of the quality of our colleges and universities. And we want to be sure that those out-of-state folks, young folks, have those rights and that access as well. So that's something that we have just put forth, and also gender-affirming care for folks. So this is Massachusetts leading once again.
Excellent, Sue. Well, that's all the bullet points I have for you today. Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't discussed yet?
No, I just really appreciate the community in Falmouth being so active. And, you know, we saw marches on the town green. Folks on the Cape and in Falmouth are very committed and informed and pay attention, and I really appreciate that partnership.
Great. Well, I'm sure Falmouth appreciates your work as well.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming in the studio today, Sue.
Appreciate it, Jeff.
Excellent. So this has been Senate Spotlight. It's summer 2022 right now, and we will have Senator Sue Moran, back in the studio again, maybe later this fall. Thanks for watching.